The Bible is filled with mysterious characters, some making brief appearances and then vanishing without explanation. While some remain mere footnotes in biblical history, others leave behind enigmatic legacies that continue to intrigue scholars and believers alike. Here are 10 obscure figures from the Bible that you should know about. Number 10. Cain's wife. According to the book of Genesis, Cain, the first human ever born, infamously killed his younger brother Abel in a fit of jealousy because God favored Abel's offering over his own. As punishment, God marked Cain and condemned him to a nomadic life. But then, the narrative takes a curious turn. Cain settles in the land of Nod and suddenly has a wife. Who was this mysterious woman? The Bible offers no details about her origins, leaving room for much speculation. Some theories suggest there were other tribes existing alongside Adam and Eve's family, while others argue that Cain married one of his sisters or nieces, as Adam and Eve were believed to have had many children. Regardless, Cain's wife remains one of the most puzzling figures in biblical lore. Number 9. Onan. Onan's story is brief, but has had an outsized influence on religious discussions for centuries. He was the second son of Judah, the fourth son of Jacob, and part of the lineage that would eventually lead to King David and Jesus Christ. His father, Judah, arranged for his eldest son, to marry a woman named Tamar. However, was described as being wicked in the sight of the Lord, and as a result, God struck him dead. According to ancient customs, particularly the practice of levirate marriage, when a man died without leaving a male heir, his brother was expected to marry the widow and produce offspring in his brother's name. This ensured that the deceased man's lineage would continue and that the widow would have a place of security within the family structure. Onan, as the next oldest son, was required to fulfill this duty by marrying Tamar and fathering a child who would legally be considered Er's heir. However, Onan had other plans. He agreed to marry Tamar, but when they engaged in intercourse, he deliberately spilled his seed on the ground, rather than allowing conception to occur. The Bible states, "But Onan knew that the offspring would not be his. So whenever he went into his brother's wife, he spilled the semen on the ground, lest he should give offspring to his brother. And what he did was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and he put him to death also." Genesis 38:9-10. Onan's refusal was not merely about personal preference. It was an act of defiance that disrupted the social and legal expectations of the time. By avoiding conception, Onan ensured that any children born to Tamar would not inherit his own share of Judah's estate, thereby preserving his own wealth and status. In essence, his actions were driven by greed and self-interest, rather than a moral objection to the practice itself. This passage has been widely interpreted over the centuries. In the early Christian and medieval periods, theologians often cited Onan's story as a condemnation of contraception or any form of birth control. The term onanism was historically used as a euphemism for self-gratification and other forms of non-procreative sexual activity. However, modern scholars argue that Onan's sin was not simply the act of contraception, but rather his deliberate rebellion against the familial and social obligation placed upon him. His punishment was not for the act itself, but for his refusal to carry out his duty to his deceased brother and to the wider community. Onan's story is often overshadowed by more prominent biblical narratives, yet it remains significant because of its lasting impact on religious and ethical discussions. His defiance ultimately led to his downfall, and his fate serves as a stark warning in the biblical text about the consequences of selfishness and disobedience to divine law. Number 8. King Og. King Og of Bashan is one of the last known descendants of the Nephilim, a race of giants mentioned in Genesis 6. He is referenced multiple times in the Bible, including in Deuteronomy 3:11, which states that his bed measured an astounding 13.6 feet in length. The Nephilim were said to be the offspring of fallen angels and human women, and they frequently clashed with the Israelites. Despite his immense size and strength, King Og and his entire army were defeated by Moses and the Israelites, marking the end of a once powerful lineage of giants. Number 7. The beloved disciple. The Gospel of John frequently references the disciple whom Jesus loved, a figure who was present at key moments like the Last Supper and the crucifixion. Many assume this disciple was John himself, but others have speculated that it could have been Lazarus, Mary Magdalene, or even an unnamed follower. The ambiguity surrounding this figure has led to centuries of debate. Was he truly John, or was he someone else entirely? The mystery remains unsolved. Number 6. Simon the Zealot. Among Christ's 12 disciples, Simon the Zealot remains one of the most enigmatic figures. Unlike Peter, John, or even Judas Iscariot, who are central to the gospel narratives, Simon is mentioned only a handful of times in the New Testament, and little is known about his life or ministry. His name, Simon the Zealot, has led to much speculation. The term zealot could indicate that he was part of the radical Jewish sect known as the Zealots, a political and religious movement that fiercely opposed Roman rule over Judea. The Zealots were known for their militant resistance, sometimes engaging in acts of violence and insurrection against the Roman authorities, seeking to restore Jewish independence. Some historians have even linked them to the Sicarii, a group of Jewish assassins who targeted Roman officials and Jewish collaborators. However, there is no direct evidence in the Bible that Simon was actively involved in such a movement before following Jesus. Some scholars argue that his title may not have referred to a political affiliation at all, but rather to his intense religious devotion. In this interpretation, zealot could simply mean that Simon was zealous for God's law and deeply passionate about his faith, rather than a revolutionary in the political sense. This would align him more with figures like Phinehas, a priest in the Old Testament known for his zeal in upholding God's commands. Numbers 25, 6-13. Regardless of the meaning behind his title, Simon's presence among Jesus' disciples is remarkable. If he had once been part of the Zealot movement, it would mean that Jesus brought together followers from vastly different backgrounds, ranging from Simon, a nationalist who may have resented Roman occupation, to Matthew, a former tax collector who worked for the Romans. This would illustrate the radical inclusivity of Jesus' ministry, which united people across political and social divides in a common mission. After Jesus' resurrection, Simon disappears from the biblical narrative. However, later Christian traditions suggest that he continued spreading the gospel, possibly traveling as far as Egypt, Persia, or even Britain to preach. Some accounts claim he was martyred for his faith, though the details of his death vary widely. Some say he was crucified, while others suggest he was sawed in half or died peacefully. Despite the lack of definitive information, Simon the Zealot's story remains compelling. Whether he was a former revolutionary or simply a man of intense faith, his unwavering commitment to Christ and his willingness to follow him to the end make him one of the more intriguing yet shadowy figures among the apostles. Number 5. Balaam and the talking donkey. Balaam, a prophet hired by King Balak of Moab to curse Israel, is best remembered for his talking donkey. In Numbers 22, as Balaam traveled to meet Balak, his donkey suddenly stopped and refused to move forward. Frustrated, Balaam beat the animal, only for it to miraculously speak, asking why it was being struck. It was then that Balaam's eyes were opened, and he saw an angel blocking the path. This bizarre yet profound event serves as a reminder of divine intervention and the unexpected ways in which God communicates. Number 4. David's mighty men. King David had a group of elite warriors known as David's mighty men, a band of valiant fighters whose extraordinary feats of bravery and strength helped secure David's reign and protect Israel. These warriors were divided into different ranks, with the most renowned among them forming a trio of unparalleled champions. One of the greatest was Adino the Eznite, who single-handedly struck down 800 men with his spear in a single battle. displaying an almost superhuman level of endurance and skill. Another legendary warrior was Eleazar, son of Dodo, who fought so fiercely against the Philistines that his hand clung to his sword, refusing to let go even after the battle had ended. His unwavering determination became a symbol of relentless devotion to Israel's cause. Shammah, son of Agi, also distinguished himself by standing alone in a field against an advancing Philistine force. While others fled, he held his ground and defended the territory, securing victory through sheer courage and faith. Beyond these three, David's mighty men included many other skilled fighters, each contributing to Israel's military success. Though they are not as widely known as David himself, their loyalty, strength, and heroic deeds played a crucial role in shaping the biblical history of Israel. Number 3. Methuselah. Methuselah, the grandfather of Noah, holds the record for the longest lifespan in the Bible, living an astonishing 969 years. Genesis 5:27. His name itself is often interpreted as having prophetic significance, with some scholars suggesting that it means, "When he dies, it shall come," potentially foreshadowing the great flood that followed shortly after his death. Methuselah was the son of Enoch, a righteous man who famously walked with God and was taken directly to heaven without experiencing death. Genesis 5:24. His extraordinary longevity has been a subject of intrigue, with some theorizing that his extended life was a symbol of God's patience, allowing humanity as much time as possible to repent before the impending judgment. According to traditional interpretations, Methuselah died in the same year the flood began, possibly just 7 days before the rains came, as suggested in Genesis 7:10, where God instructed Noah to enter the ark a week before the deluge. His unique position in biblical chronology has led many to view Methuselah's life as a divine marker, his death serving as a final warning before God's wrath was unleashed upon the world. Whether seen as a symbol of God's mercy or simply an ancient patriarch who bridged the generations between Adam and Noah, Methuselah remains one of the most enigmatic figures in biblical history. Number 2. The Witch of Endor. Desperate for guidance before an impending battle, King Saul sought out the Witch of Endor, despite God's command against consulting mediums. The witch supposedly summoned the spirit of the prophet Samuel, who delivered a grim prophecy. Saul and his sons would die the next day. True to the prophecy, Saul's sons were slain, and the defeated king took his own life. The identity of the summoned spirit, whether it was truly Samuel or a deception, remains one of the Bible's spookiest mysteries. Number 1. King Josiah. Josiah became king of Judah at just 8 years old and later led one of the greatest religious reforms in biblical history. He rediscovered the lost book of the law, and upon realizing how far the people had strayed from God's commandments, initiated a revival. Despite his young age, Josiah's dedication to God set him apart from many of Israel's kings, showing that faith and leadership are not bound by age. The Bible is filled with hidden gems, characters whose stories, though often brief, carry profound lessons, mysteries, and intrigue. From warriors and prophets to forgotten disciples and enigmatic rulers, these figures add depth to the biblical narrative and leave us with questions that continue to spark debate and fascination. Who do you think is the most intriguing obscure character in the Bible? Have we missed someone you believe deserves a spot on this list? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into biblical mysteries, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next exploration into the hidden wonders of history and faith.